Today on News and Views.
You go and solve a mathematical puzzle. How does, in the name of God, it get a monetary value attached to itself?
So there is a market of buyers and sellers. There are exchanges offering this marketplace. It's the people that are setting this price, right? It's buy and sell behaviors.
It removes the centralization and the control that somebody has over issue of a medium of exchange. A state or a sovereign or a central bank have the control over a medium of exchange.
Is Bitcoin the best gold, digital gold? Because, it's by code, it's already limited in supply.
You are listening to News and Views, the Quint's podcast series where we introduce you to some of the greatest minds across different fields through in-depth interviews. I'm Raghav Bahl, and today we are talking about crypto, precisely about how it gets its value. This is part of our series Think.NXT with Raghav. I'll be talking to Tanvi Ratna, founder and CEO, Policy 4.0, Siddharth Menon, co-founder of WazirX, Punit Agarwal, founder KoinX, and Praveen Chakravarty, a politician and a public intellectual. You can check out episodes of News and Views and all other podcasts by the Quint on our website or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be thinking next with cryptocurrency. And you already have seen the stellar cast of experts that we have on the show with us. So I'm going to swing straight into our first question. And the first question may sound very elemental to my very distinguished panel of experts, but this is the question that exercises the minds of ordinary people. And I'm going to therefore put it very bluntly. You go and solve a mathematical puzzle. You use a ton of computing power. You use a ton of energy, and you get maybe some kind of a digital file at the end of it, which is called a coin. How does, in the name of God, it get a monetary value attached to itself? When I have a 100 rupee or a $100 note, it's the government backing it and saying there is that value. When I go mining for gold, I'm getting some precious metal, which the world needs and has priced, and therefore it has a monetary value. How does solving a mathematical puzzle invest in that digital file a monetary value? Praveen, can you solve this little thing I'm confounded by?
It is a very good question, Raghav. So there's a technology element to it, and then there is an economics element to it. See, the idea of a currency. What is the idea of a currency? Actually, contrary to what most people think, I think the idea of a currency is actually a political idea. The idea comes from the fact that there is a certain means of trust that people need to be able to engage in transactions in society. And that trust is determined by the political environment and the political stability. Now, that trust could be in the form of a state-issued currency, or it could be another state-issued currency, such as in Latin American countries. There is perhaps more trust in an American currency than in their own currency. So the idea of a currency is not sovereign in the sense that we think of it. It's the idea of trust, and that is fundamentally a political idea. Now, when it comes to a coin, that's a technology product, and how does that suddenly evoke trust? Trust is evoked based on what people believe, and it is not necessarily because the state or a sovereign is backing it. And I want to separate the two, because too often we conflate the two. Just because a state or a sovereign backs something does not mean it automatically gets the trust of its people. Or just because the state or the sovereign does not back something, it also does not mean that people will not trust it. So, and I think this is where the idea of cryptocurrency is somewhat confusing and befuddling for many people, because it's neither state issued, nor has it won the trust of people automatically or organically on its own. So where does it stand, and why should crypto be a currency? So any economist will tell you it's not a currency.
Fine. Yeah. So we'll move to that point about whether it's an asset or a currency. So you've heard the economist say it. You heard the layman ask the question. I don't get it. So I'm going to go to Tanvi and ask her the same question. How does my solving a mathematical puzzle give me monetary value?
Yeah, thanks, Raghav. I think it's a great question, and I very much agree with what Mr. Chakravarty said. So, at the heart of it, it has to do with trust, right? But I would also like to flip your question a little bit. I don't necessarily think it's about how it derives its monetary value. I think you're asking about something specific, which is how do you value an asset which doesn't have a cash flow, right? I think I will just take that.
Spot on, Tanvi. Spot on. How do you value an asset which does not have an underlying cash flow?
Yes. And I think that's one of the larger questions that has been thrown up by the current contagion events, right? And that's something that we've been looking at very closely at our think tank. We just tabled a report for the G20 on it. So I think in a nutshell, if I were to take your question, I think crypto is, priced the same way other assets are priced. It's priced by a market. Right. So there is a market of buyers and sellers. There are exchanges offering this marketplace. And it's the people that are setting this price, right? It's buy and sell behavior. So I don't think that's where the issue really lies. The issue really lies in the fact that, what is it getting priced based on, right? And I think that's a very complex question, right? Because it is, as Mr. Chakravarty said, to a large part, it's being priced on trust. Right. To a large part, it might be getting priced in terms of reputational or brand ethos, right? That it carries. But I think the bigger question, which now, and we have some veterans of the industry as well, the bigger question that now we need to answer in this ecosystem is, what is the underlying cash flow? What is the underlying business model on which we are going to start pricing the class of assets, right? And I think that's where the bulk of regulatory debate internationally is also now focused.
So let me get Siddharth in here. Now you've heard what Tanvi said. You heard what Praveen said. You heard my question as well. If there is no underlying cash flow, all you have is a digital set of codes which you probably end up owning. Even a painting has some aesthetic value which you can put some value to as an aficionado. But how do you put a value to a coin?
Absolutely. Like Tanvi said, it's a very complex question, but let me break it down, sort of extending from what Mr. Praveen said about trust, right? And that's a very important thing, right? We are all in that journey of humankind is in a journey of evolution from township to a kingdom to country, and now thinking about living on the internet. And when it comes to the country level, we trust the government, right? When it was kingdom, we trust the kings of the land and so on and so forth. But when it is completely decentralized, how do you get trust of everybody, right? Which is beyond country. And this is where the cryptocurrency has, from a technology point of view, has solved, where it's transparent and as long as you believe in the code, you can see the code. You can actually scale trust. Not with a person, not with around people, but with machines, right? And you're sort of delegating that. And that opens up a lot more opportunity for a lot of things. Starting from, as basic as a currency or probably an asset, right? And we are in that whole midst of creating different layers of financial systems and things around it. Everybody's looking for what's the digital gold? What's the digital currency? What's the digital equivalent in this whole space? And we are in that whole process. It's not solved yet. But, when we think about gold, we can see the reason that we believe in gold is for the fact that it's limited, everybody needs it from a backing point of view. And similarly, when we're building this, the similar question comes in, hey, is Bitcoin the best gold, digital gold? Because, it's by code, it's already limited in supply. And there is difficulty or there's an economic action that you need to do to produce more gold.
It's still that confusion. It's still that confusion in everyone's head. Where does it get its value? Yes, it gets a value because two people think it's got a value. But that's very ephemeral, right? There is nothing.
Right. So to me, when I think about that narration, very personally, and we are thinking about that, it's an inevitable future, right? Metaverse is an inevitable future where we are all going to become more globalized, just like how the information era was. To me, the value is much more higher than what it is even today, because if I were to just think about Bitcoin, why primarily?
I'm not talking. When I say value, I'm not talking about the monetary value attached to it.
Right.
How does it get an intrinsic value? Any asset, unless
it's a combination of belief and narration, which is a little more complex. Everybody has different aspect to it. Like for me, it's technology, and for everybody else is different aspect. But I think from that point of view, it just makes sense.
You solve this puzzle for us.
So bits and pieces, I agree on all the thoughts that Praveen, Tanvi, and Siddharth has been putting around. Like it's something. So I feel it's a medium of exchange. So let's say if that asset, if any coin you're able to hold in, and you're able to give it to someone else, and like exchange anything in return, that gets in a value. So for example, if I'm able to give in a Bitcoin and I'm able to buy pizza, or maybe pay that as salaries to some of the employees, or like if someone accepts it, and if someone says that, okay, this is something that you can pay, and I consider this as a value against my services or my offerings that I'm rendering towards you, then it gets in a value automatically. So in the nutshell, like it's kind of a mode of an exchange through which
it seems to be boiling down to two consenting adults saying, I believe there is a value here, and therefore I will go ahead and move and accept the value, because there doesn't seem to be any underlying reason why there should be a value. So I come now to the second conundrum that's being talked about. And Tanvi, let me come to you, and I'm going to come to Praveen right at the end of this. Now, is it even a currency, or is it a store of value like an asset? And therefore, are we, in a sense, going back to medieval times where we are trying to use an asset as a currency, the good old barter system? Where you say, take a ton of onions and give me a ton of wheat, or that kind of thing?
I think this question, there's a very short-term lens which you could put, very narrow lens of a monetarist, and you can look at 7 criteria and say that it's not currency. But the truth of money is that it's just a technology, right? It's just what people have used to move value over time. Right. And we have given it these structures of a monetary system where, if you look at the history, even central banking is a very new phenomenon, right? It's maybe been around like 100 years. So I think, things that Siddharth said about, things that Punit said about people agreeing to exchange value, about it being of value in time in the digital space, right? I think those things are very important when you think about this question, right? Because I think crypto is a symptom of just a lot of underlying drivers kind of changing in the world, right? Like in terms of what people value, in terms of how they want to hold their wealth, their assets, in terms of their economic behavior. Like all these things are changing, and you are seeing, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? People are seeing value in it, then they're seeing value in it, right? We can make all sorts of academic conclusions saying that it's this or that, but ultimately, everything is decided by the market, and I think that's where we should look to for answers to this.
Is it because, and I'm going to ask both the exchange founders here, is it because the currency has certain elements of shadiness to it? It allows transactions which a legal tender may not allow. Is that where the first whiff of value comes from? And then as it gets more into vogue and more into use, and people become more comfortable with the fact that I can exchange it for value, and then the value proposition grows. Does it come in and fill a vacuum which legal tender does not? Is that where it starts getting its first whiff of value, Punit?
So I think people, I look at it similar to the stock market, like how we have the stock markets where there are different private limited, different companies who come in and, who list their shares, and people tend to trade on them. People tend to buy these shares looking at what future prospect of these companies could be. Similarly, in cryptocurrencies, there are different projects that are building in some utility out of it. They're trying to solve in a problem that exists in the real world, and through their project, they're trying to address that problem in a decentralized way, or in a like in a blockchain technology way. So that is where people are bullish on, or people are trading on these idea and the the validations that they are making on this, and looking at to bet on which project would work on, which project is actually solving that problem, which project is actually taking that to the masses, and which has in that potential to like impact in the billions. That is where I believe like a lot of people are looking at cryptocurrencies, deciding which coins to invest in, which coins to trade on. And that is how the exchanges, as per also doing their due diligence in terms of who is the team building it.
Interesting then, Punit, that all the analogies you've used seem to suggest that it's an asset and it's not a currency. You've used stock, you've used tradable on an exchange where people perceive some price for it. Therefore, the conundrum still continues. I've spoken to two of you, and the conundrum continues whether it's really an asset or a currency. I'm going to come to Siddharth.
Yeah, I think to me, it's again a medium, right? Evolution of money is always picks up the path of lowest friction. So, to do a transaction, and ultimately it all matters how many transactions can we do through, say, cash, and then through UPI, now through, if it's a global, using a current cryptocurrencies. And I think that's the path, and it's the evolution of what cryptocurrency is going through is not something that is new. It has historically already happened multiple times for a lot of monetary system. Probably it is used for wrong reasons. Okay, maybe, but eventually it is being used for right reasons. Eventually, the technology is sort of embraced, and now even we are also thinking about getting digital with a digital token even in India. So if you think about it, it's just a medium. It's technology that just makes it easier to do transactions.
I get all of that, but my fundamental question here was, how did it start getting a sense of value, or how did people start investing a bit of value in it? And my sort of hypothesis was that perhaps because you could use this asset or this currency to do certain things that you could not do using legal tender. Probably because it was cross-border, probably because some of the assets or the goods that you could exchange with it, you would not be able to do with legal tender. Is that where it started getting its value? And then, as you said, once it got value and people started using it, then it started getting used for right things as well. Is that too far-fetched, or is there some modicum of
it's not really, because if you speak to people who've been working in 2013 also, 2012, even freelancers, they were getting paid in Bitcoin, who are doing probably digital work or software work. And obviously, famously, we all know about Silk Route. It's been used for something more illegal. But that's just one part of the story, right? When we are talking about paying people online, some people still can't take money on their bank through USD because it takes time. It takes 3 or 4 days. So the freelancer cannot commit to a job. So because of this whole friction, the payment through Bitcoin was much more easier. People could directly accept a job and start working on it, whether it's at once. So there are a lot of things that even technology-wise it has provided, which is just remove this friction and brought in this adoption. And I think that probably the start. But yes, there are good and bad when it comes to whatever it is.
Of course, right. A phenomenon of this scale cannot just be based on one thing. My thing was only on how it started getting invested in value. Praveen, you've heard everyone. You've heard my questions. Do you think that it got invested in value because it started doing things which legal tender could not, and then that snowballed, and then that gathered a momentum of its own, and then trust came in, and then technology developed, and then it became slowly something far more acceptable? Is that a simplistic description of how cryptocurrency has become such a largely acceptable phenomenon?
It's not, Raghav. It's not a wildly. It's not a wild theory. So and listen, we have parallels in history. I mean, you go back to tulips and people exchanging tulips. Let us take a hypothetical example. Let us say that I'm going to give you peacock feathers. in return for your painting. And you say, fine, I'll take your peacock feathers. And then you take that peacock feathers and you go and give it to somebody else. It doesn't have to do anything with technology. You're just accepting my peacock feathers and somebody else is accepting the peacock feathers that I gave you. So I think the technology element is almost irrelevant to the idea that this is a medium of exchange. Now, the technologies and the engineers would argue that it's the technology that builds a certain level of trust. But history has always showed us that you don't need any of those things. You could get something adapted quickly as a medium of exchange. And there could be various things that propel this. See, I think where there's a I go back to the idea of trust. The idea of trust can be two ways. One is a big state, a sovereign, or a government telling you, this is correct, trust this is legal, and I stand guarantee. That's one way of inducing trust. The other way of inducing trust are just people in society saying, I just trust this. I trust peacock feathers, I trust some random coin, I trust a cryptocurrency. So it could be either of the two. I think the fundamental idea that the technologists and the engineers argue is that it removes the centralization and the control that somebody has over issue of a medium of exchange. They're fundamentally questioning the idea that why should a state or a sovereign or a central bank have the control over a medium of exchange? Fair enough. But then let's flip the question. If something were to go wrong, whose throat do you choke? Because the very idea of trust also depends on if something goes wrong, who can you go to?
And
who can be responsible?
And enforceability. Right? Enforceability.
Exactly.
I mean, ultimately, we live in a society where laws need to be enforced. Because if they're not enforced, then you're talking about lawlessness. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you may disagree violently with the concept of a government, but a government does have the job of enforcing social order.
Exactly.
And the ability to enforce things.
Exactly. Like in your own profession, Raghav, say media versus social media. When there is something wrong, you know that if it was an editor in a mainstream newspaper, you can go hold the editor responsible. The editor is ultimately responsible for the truthfulness and the veracity of the news. In a democratized social media template, there is no one that's responsible or accountable for this. And hence, there is less trust in social media.
Okay, so now if trust seems to be the underlying theme and acceptance seems to be the underlying theme. Now, Tanvi, I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to take a short while to, I was once having a conversation with a bunch of very bright young people, and I was coming across as a crypto skeptic to them, and they, of course, being young people, were completely, gung-ho on crypto and how it's fundamentally going to change the world. So one of the young people asked me, when do you think crypto will become a big phenomenon that you don't seem to be today convinced by? And I said, I believe that cryptos will become a revolution in the world of finance when you can attach an underlying cash flow to it. So then they asked me, how does that happen? So I said, listen, think of the Empire State Building. Now, if I want to own the Empire State Building, I can't. But if the Empire State Building can be broken down into, say, 1,000 commercial units, different commercial units and offices, and each commercial unit and office can be a non-fungible token which gets traded on a crypto exchange, and that each token has an underlying cash flow, then I can take a call and say, all right, I like the corner office on the 21st floor. It overlooks Central Park. That's going to get more rent than the other ones. So I'd rather buy the token which is representing the 21st floor office. I said, that's when a cash flow gets attached to a crypto token. And that's when I believe there'll be a revolution. Now, again, am I on the wrong track there?
Yeah, I think you throw some tough questions, Raghav. I mean, I'm going to try my best to answer it in a bite-sized response. I think the real issue with cash flow is that it throws up a very big conundrum at the heart of crypto, right? Crypto was not built to have cash flows from fiat money, right? It was built to sort of be its own system, a parallel economic and financial system. And it's only later that this sort of financialization of crypto began, right? Where people started valuing it essentially in dollars, right?
Right.
So now, there are big ethical sort of questions that even crypto internally, like the industry has to figure out, right? Right now, like the value that's going into crypto is going from, fiat money moving into crypto, right? So there's more and more money going into it. And so there's more and more value and valuation going into it, right? Now, the way to create cash flow for a system like that is to have regulations, right? Like you can't have fiat money moving in and getting pricing your services and something like that unless there's regulation that enables you to do that. And it enables you to price a service in crypto and then sell it in the market, right? Like so, I think this question is a big conundrum, honestly, for the industry, and it's also a big conundrum for regulators, right? Who say like, well, why am I having to regulate this, right? This is not my economy. It's not a system that I've built. Why should I come in and try and make sure things are fair and good and services work, right? Like that's not my job, right? Like it's not my system. So I think there's no real answer to that. I think it comes down to, as so said, if crypto in its structure and form that it has, is it able to win the trust of people, right, as a system? It's all going to come down to that.
Right.
Is it going to reach a space where people are ready to price in it, people are ready to use it? Then really this question of cash flow can come in.
Okay, so really the enduring word through this discussion has been trust. So I'm going to ask you, Punit, in my worldview, and I come from the old world, in my worldview, trust will only come when there is equivalence of cash flow with a crypto token. Do you accept it or you don't accept it?
I believe it will be a mix of, we cannot see complete decentralization. We cannot see complete centralization. It would come when it comes with transparency. When people will start looking at it that, okay, I'm able to, let's say, transfer in funds instantly from one place to another, or government benefits, like subsidiaries and schemes are being able to go down deeper into the roots on ground to the person who actually need it, but in a transparent way, in a way that is, like open, clean, and everyone can see the trail of it. And that's where the power of technology and the underlying cryptocurrency would come in.
But I would argue that with the legacy systems becoming very digitally driven, whether it's even our own UPI, and the fact that you can instantly now transfer money, I think that advantage will go away, won't it? I mean, today if I have to transfer money to my son in New York, it takes 10 hours through the banking system. While in the crypto world, if both of us have wallets at both ends and all of that's legal, it'll happen in no time. But I mean, 10 hours, how is that so important that I switch from fiat currency to Bitcoin?
Like 10 hours might be, for seldom transactions or one-off transactions, maybe in a month would not look at, you would not feel to convert in. But imagine of businesses who do these transactions daily, multiple times with multiple parties, and who are, like into the import-export business, and they have to pay 10 hours of rent at the ports if they transact, if their shipments are just, have reached in and there's no one to collect in, or they're waiting for the payments at all. So there are huge losses that comes along with this, with the time that is associated with it. And even then, like there are many intermediaries involved. So, it's not always the case that it's 10 hours. We all have seen cases where international payments can have gone to, 5 days, 7 days, and even more just because of waiting for.
No, I was exaggerating when I said 10 hours. I mean, I love the banking system. It always takes a transaction on a Friday, then sits on the money Saturday, Sunday, and then sends it out on a Monday. So all of us have seen that. So that I'm going to come to you on the question that I asked. Do you think that is simplistic, that unless you can get a one-to-one equivalence between cash flows which underlie a digital coin, in which case then the financial revolution would have reached our doorstep? But you're saying, but is your case that even without that, this can carry on the way it is, without a one-to-one equivalence?
Yeah, I
No,
believe
definitely.
without even 1:1 equivalence, it can.
Okay. Siddharth?
Yeah, definitely not. If it goes only speculative for all this while, I don't think so. There's going to be, there's definitely not a good end to it, right? But going back to history, like I think we saw the .com boom and also the stories around it. There were businesses which is getting funded, which attracted a lot more talents to start building onto it, and then now everything collapsed. But still, it went on, right? It still attracted a lot of bunch to actually start building onto it. Like if I were to compare, since I was involved in crypto since almost 2015. From that to today, there are more people who are actually building and solving real problems, solving businesses which actually brings cash flow. So we are in that whole process of being built on, and there's so many projects we already know they are actually doing cash flows, but probably in the digital realm, right, in their own token or their own Bitcoin, but probably not in fiat. But that is happening now, right? So it's not going to be something that's going to be forever. Now we have more talent which got attracted for whatever reason, right? And now that's being built. So over time, I don't think so. This is going to be, the speculation will not stay forever. The cash flow will come, and I think it gets more real.
And regulation has to evolve, right? Laws have to evolve to enable something like that. Praveen, inevitable last word on this subject from you. Did you find my Empire State Building example fanciful, or did it have some merit to it?
No, I don't quite agree with the idea that there has to be cash flows. I think that stems from the fact that we are in a fiat currency world today. But remember, the fiat currency is, 50 years old. 60 years old. That's about it. 1971 is when we moved to fiat currency. Before that, these were not traded. So so my first question is, why should this be traded at all in the first place? And if it doesn't need to be traded, then why do you need Why do you need cash flows? Assets, for example, houses. There are no cash flows in it. Theoretically, you could argue. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Theoretically,
there is an implied cash flow to a house.
Correct. It's implied, but that's what I'm saying. So before fiat currency, there was no idea of a tradable currency. And all of this is just about 50, 60 years old. So
before that was only gold, right? The only underlying asset was gold.
Correct. So it was all whether you found gold or not. So you were not like trading kind of gold back and forth and determining a market-driven value to it, right? So for a sovereign currency, So the idea that there has to be cash flows is perhaps not something that that is mandatory. But it goes back to, is it a currency or not, right? And if it is not a currency, and by currency I mean the political idea of a store of value and a medium of exchange, then all the other discussion is moot. And I do not think it will gain, pardon the pun here, gain currency as a currency, because I think it's neither a state-enforced trust that cryptos have found, nor have societies at large accepted it as a medium of exchange. So it's somewhat stuck in this quagmire.
I think that's absolutely the right note as well. This is ultimately a choice that you, I, and billions of all of us will make, provided, of course, there is a regulatory framework which is, leveling out the playing field, which is enforcing trust. All of those things, the cryptocurrency still has a long way to go there. So on that note, I would like to thank all my panelists for a discussion on a very complex subject, on something which is difficult for ordinary people like us to fully understand. But I think we got a sense of where this could be heading and what the positives and the negatives and the pitfalls are. Thank you once again, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
And that was this episode of News and Views with Tanvi Ratna, founder and CEO, Policy 4.0, Siddharth Menon, co-founder of WazirX, Punit Agarwal, founder KoinX, and Praveen Chakravarty, a politician and a public intellectual. Follow us on Instagram at The Quint and tell us what you want to talk about next week. And check out our website, thequint.com, for more groundbreaking reports and videos. This was Raghav Bahl, and I'll see you in the next one. News and Views is a Quint original podcast executive produced by Shelly Walia and Ritu Kapoor. This episode was hosted by Raghav Bahl, produced and edited by Prateek Liddu, with theme music from BMG. A special thanks to our guests, Tanvi Ratna, Siddharth Menon, Punit Agarwal, and Praveen Chakravarty.
You were listening to the Quint's podcast.